بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Obviously, you're someone who has spent a lot of time studying religion, both academically and through traditional Islamic studies. So let's try to take advantage of your experience as a student and as a scholar. First of all, I think today the internet and technology has made it very easy for someone to have access to, unfathomable amounts of information and teachers and works. So generally speaking, and I don't know in your case, how much would you say is, let's say, the percentage or the ratio between your independent study versus always being in the presence of a teacher or under the direction and supervision of a teacher? What is generally your opinion and even perhaps your advice in this kind of world? The importance of being associated with a teacher or not, and relying, let's say, more on technology and correspondence and the internet, for instance, as opposed to actually being under the tutelage of a teacher.
So I think this is very important. And the reason I'll tell you is because, and again, all my mistakes are owned by me, obviously, and not by anyone else. I take full ownership of my mistakes. And there's many mistakes in my scholarship. There is in everybody's scholarship.
Of course.
If I did not have the guidance of people like Sayyid Muhammad al-Radawi and Sayyid Muhammad Hussein al-Jalali and Sheikh Muhammad Hassan al-Muballigh and Sayyid Mustafa Sadr and Sheikh Ghalib Nasser and Sayyid Sistani. Again, I'm not claiming to be a student of Sayyid Sistani. I'm not. It's just the conversations that we've had about the subject. I'm not a student of his, and I'm not claiming that at all. People like Sayyid al-Hakim, people like Sheikh Bashir al-Najafi, who's actually written for me documents on this subject. He's written for me a bath of his own hand on the subjects. This has exponentially clarified for me things that I otherwise would have made a mess of. Because we have to accept that whatever we read, we're not the first ones to have read it. We should not be arrogant enough to think that we're the first at it. There is an intellectual, the first to ask the question or even attempt to answer it, or even to think of it. Maybe someone hasn't written it, but I'm sure someone has thought about it. And obviously my writing is independent, my research is, and once you learn the research skills, then you can almost write on anything. If you have the knowledge of those subjects, whether it be in fiqh, whether it be in usul, whether it be in philosophy, whether it be in history, as you can see, my interests are so kind of wide, And I think that's again because of the influence of Sayyid Muhammad al-Radawi, because he is such a scholar of such great caliber. I mean, I could read with him Avicenna, and I could switch from Avicenna to Tabari. From Tabari back to Avicenna, from Avicenna to Sharif al-Murtada, from Sharif al-Murtada to, to Ziyarat al-Mutlaqa of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. From that to Ali bin Ibrahim al-Qummi's introduction. This is what it means by a scholar who has هو مسلط على نصوص. He understands how to read nusus and understand them.
Yes.
I'm just giving that as one example. There's many other scholars like that as well. And when you meet people like this, they teach you things. Even if they don't know the answer to the question, they'll help you think about the question in a way that will always be enriching to you. Be enriching. Either by correspondence or in person. I think it is very important. Until we're at the stage where we say that, even then, I don't think we're ever at the stage where we say, I don't need anyone to read my work. I don't think that. Because even the mujtahid has his students read his work. Even the mujtahid has his students do munaqasha of his bahth and his discussion. So even the maraja have people, critiquing them every day in class, right? And that's how they sharpen their own ideas, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a point where we could simply say we can just be independent. And I think sometimes when we become too independent, we make mistakes. Or we'll still make mistakes the other way, but we will make more mistakes and there'll be more reckless mistakes. We'll be more reckless. So we need both an intellectual mentor and spiritual mentors who keep us humble, who teach us humility, who can correct us both spiritually and intellectually when we are perhaps exceeding the limits. when we're entering into thinking about something that perhaps, might not be the best way of thinking about it. Again, it's not to control our mind, but to give us that sense of mentorship. And I think that's very important, to have both spiritual mentorship and intellectual mentorship. And if you can find spiritual and intellectual mentorship in the same person, then that is an ustad, then that is a teacher. And if you have multiple people who can serve that purpose, then that is, of course, there's no greater ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than that, right? Because at the end of the day, as I always tell people, I could be left with nothing at the end of the day, materially. But those relationships are beyond any material wealth, because they enrich you both spiritually and intellectually. And that's the madhab of Ahlul Bayt.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد